Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So one of the questions that came in the group was regarding how to write down notes in lesson. So as the brother says, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. Sorry if there are any mistakes in my notes, as I don't know how to write notes properly, especially when it comes to Islamic studies, and I often have to listen to the audio and transcribe in order to understand. I'm putting my notes here and so forth. And this is a common question that comes especially at the beginning of one's learning, i.e. sometimes I feel that I'm writing everything that the teacher says, and it doesn't have to be like that. So when we were doing Thalathat al-Usul, this question popped up, and we managed to write something down, a brief couple of points on it. So we'll look at the points inshallah ta'ala, and hopefully it will be of benefit. So the person asked, there is a lot to take down during the lesson. How do I manage to get it all written? What do I focus on if I can't note everything down? So the answer was, Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I say, seeking the help of Allah, that what is mentioned in lessons is of different levels and serves different purposes. i.e. not everything that the teacher says is what you have to, not everything that the teacher says has the same weight, carries the same weight, or should be given the same priority. So there are different things that the teacher says, so we need to be able to differentiate between them and prioritize the most important things, the main goals of that book, and then see what other things need to be written down. Before we actually go into this, a couple of points. One of the things that when I've asked some of the students about, some of them did not have this, so I had taken it for granted. You need to have the book. So any book that you're going through, that you're studying, as in properly studying, especially these books that we're covering now, you need to have a physical form of the book. So buy the book, unless the teacher says you don't have to. Buy the book. And if you can't, then you should have, or if you can't, then you should have a PDF at least, and ask one of the brothers to print it for you if you haven't got a printer, or bind it for you and pay for it. It's a worthy investment, because there's no way that we come to sit and read the books of a book of an author, and you can't even refer back to the book because you don't have it. That is not that is going to delay a person's learning a lot. So you need to have these books that we're studying now, you need to have them, and you need to be familiar with what the author is saying. And the teacher's explanation is helping you to understand what the author is saying. It's not a new book that the teacher's putting out. The aim of it is that the teacher's clarifying what the author is saying. So in your mind, from week to week, lesson to lesson, you should know what the author has said, even if you haven't memorized it word for word. So everybody should have the physical copy of the book that you're doing, unless otherwise stated. Like some of the books that we're going to do inshallah, you don't need to have the physical copy of it. But in the books that we've covered, you should have the physical copy. And if you can't get it, then you should ask your classmates, and if not, then you should ask the teacher. Okay? But it shouldn't be that you're studying and you don't even have the book. That is going to delay a person's learning a lot. And when you do have the book, then you can have the book in front of you in the class at the place where we're at, and next to it you have your notepad where you can write some notes. And if you have permission to do so in the class, then you should record the class for your personal usage, not for you to publicize it everywhere, but you should have a personal recording that you can refer to, that you can listen to, on your way to work or whatever, as a form of revision. That will help you a lot, because then once you have that recording, also you can focus more on what the teacher said. And as we're going to mention some of the points here, not everything the teacher says has to be written down. Some things you can write down later, and some things you write down during the lesson. But now you have recording devices, it makes it a lot easier for you to just fully pay attention to what the teacher is saying and understand it, and later on you can exactly write down what he says. Okay, so what the teacher said has different levels and serves different purposes. So your priority should be, and Allah knows best, number one, understand the points being made by the author in the text. So as we're studying a book, the main point we want to get to is, what is the author saying? What are we understanding from this? So what is the point? What is the mas'ala? And this is a point that sometimes people miss. To be able to fully understand or grasp the issue at hand, to have a picture in your mind of what that issue is that the author has made. Then the second step after that is then understand the evidences used. So in some books you'll find that for every issue that the author mentions, there's an evidence. So for example, in Kitab al-Tawheed, you have the chapter heading and then you have evidences, sometimes one evidence, sometimes more than that. And in some other books you may find that the author may make 3 or 4 points and not bring an evidence for each point. So in those places where the evidence is used, then you need to understand the evidence. And we've mentioned that understanding the evidence has 2 aspects. The first aspect is what the evidence is. So for example, is an ayah, is it a hadith, where is it reported, and so forth. And number 2, how it is an evidence, i.e. how do we extract from the ayah or from the hadith, how does that point to the mas'ala at hand. So what is referred to as the wajh al-istidlal, or how the scholars have made istinbat, or how they have extracted from that evidence the point that is being made. So that's with regards to the evidence. These 2 points here now, understanding the points being made by the author, and then after that understanding any evidences that are used, i.e. where the evidence is and how it's an evidence. These 2 points here are what you need to focus on the most in class. Those are the most important points, because this is what is going to help you to understand the book. If you finish a book from start to finish and this is what you get from it, from your teacher, alhamdulillah. Okay, then thereafter try to remember the points the teacher explains which are directly attached to the points of the book. So which are directly attached. So for example, the author may use certain terms, may use certain points. Okay, why did he do that? Sometimes the teacher will explain. So this is the teacher's explanation here is directly connected to the point of the book. And then the last point here, note there will also be some points which are indirectly attached to the points in the book, but not attached to the book's direct aims. And these sometimes are points, the teacher may explain some points that are not directly connected to the topic of the book, even from a different subject. Okay, so in some explanations of scholars, you find that the scholar, whenever an evidence, an ayah is mentioned, the sheikh may start to give you the grammatical analysis of the ayah. Now, even if you never understood the grammatical analysis of the ayah, that part of the sheikh's explanation, if you never understood that, you can still understand the main points of the book, point number 1 and 2. Okay, so that's what is mentioned here. It's not directly connected with the aims of the book, although it has some benefits in its certain time and place. So this goes on to say, you should come out of the lesson understanding the first 2, as these are necessary to have a firm grasp of the book, i.e. these first 2 here. The third point will take extra time to grasp, and this comes through listening carefully, revising and practice. So for example, you listen to the teacher, soon you'll get faster in writing Arabic and so forth, and with the terminology that's being used. Then you listen back to the audio of the class, you sit with your classmates and you revise points, what comes under first point and the second point, and also you revise what the extra points the teacher made that are directly connected to the book. And the last point is one of the reasons students become lost. Here, lost means they get confused, not lost as in misguided, but lost in the terms that they get confused. They struggle to remember what the author said, and it becomes a lot of work for them. And it is a pitfall that teachers can fall into. That is to explain extra knowledge before the foundations are firm. So for example, if for each ayah or for an ayah that we go through, the teacher explains the grammatical analysis of the ayah, the i'rab, but the students themselves haven't studied Arabic grammar, what's going to happen? The students are not going to be able to grasp what the teacher is saying, because their foundations in Arabic grammar are not firm. Likewise, if sometimes the teacher may go into 3 or 4 different tafsirs, explanations of an ayah, and if the student is not firm, he will end up confused and it will become a lot for him. Whereas sometimes the teachers may be doing that because there are students in the class that are advanced enough to understand that. So what happens here? That is to explain extra knowledge before the foundations are firm, thereby overwhelming the student with unnecessary knowledge. Unnecessary for that student. It's not that knowledge is unnecessary for everyone, but for that student of that level. But the teacher may do this at times for a benefit he deems appropriate. And from the benefits we just mentioned now is that there are students who have got those foundations and they need the next level up. So those students, the teacher is catering for those students. So now we've mentioned those 4 points here, okay, in class, and we've discussed a little bit with regards to those 4 points. So let's look at part of a text and see, okay, from this paragraph, where are those 4 points that we mentioned above? So for example, using this part of the text, know, may Allah guide you to his obedience, that the Hanifiyya, the religion of Ibrahim, is that you worship Allah alone, making the religion sincerely for him, and Allah commanded all of mankind with that and created them for this purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created jinn nor mankind except to worship me. So point number 1, which is to understand the points that the author is making. So when we look at this paragraph, for example, point number 1 would entail understanding that the author here is asserting 2 points. There are different points, but just to make it brief, it's 2 points. Number 1, Allah commanded all of mankind with the Hanifiyya, the religion of Ibrahim, i.e. Allah commanded everyone to worship Allah alone with no partner. That's one of the points that we can extract from this paragraph of the author. And another point, that Allah created them for this purpose. So 2 points that we can get from here, that Allah commanded them with this, so here the author says, and Allah commanded all of mankind with that, i.e. with worshipping him alone, and he created them for this. So there are 2 points, distinct points here. So point number 2 now is understanding, or it would entail understanding how the ayah the author quoted is an evidence for both these points. So now if we go back, remember point number 1 was what? To understand the points being made, and then point number 2 was to know the evidence and how it's an evidence. So point number 2 then here would be, okay, the evidence, where is the evidence? It's here, it's an ayah from Surah Dhariyat. Okay, how is it an evidence? Then the teacher would explain, okay, this ayah points to these 2 things because of X, Y, Z. Point number 3 is that here, for example, would be that the teacher would explain, or the teacher's explanation of what does Hanifiyya mean in this religion. When the author says here that the Hanifiyya, okay, what does this word Hanifiyya mean? When we find this in Islam, what does it mean? Likewise, also point number 3 why was Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam mentioned here by the author when all of the prophets and messengers had the same deen? So why did he single out Ibrahim? So these are directly connected to the text. These 2 points here, for example, are directly connected to the text, although they are not the aim of the text. So the teacher would explain that, but it's not the aim of the text, but it's a benefit that is directly connected to the wording of the text. And point number 4, for example, here things that the teacher may mention, which are indirectly attached to the points in the book. So point number 4, An example of this is often found at the beginning of books, from the detailed grammatical explanation of the Basmalah or the likes, or explaining an ayah in detail but not explaining how it is an evidence or how it is used as an evidence for the point being made by the author. Although this has a time and place, it often causes delays for the beginner. So here, for example, if we look at the ayah, we start to give tafsir of the whole surah, or we start to mention the different styles of qira'at and so forth, which is not the main aim of the book. And with that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and with Him lies true success. So focus on those things bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us what benefits us, and to benefit us with what He has taught us, and Allah ta'ala knows best.